This is the K-State Radio Network, and you're listening to another Agriculture Today, our Friday edition. Welcome once more. We'll pick up on the grain markets, first of all, right here, as usual, with Dan O'Brien joining us, grain market economist, K-State Research and Extension, from his office in Colby, Northwest Kansas. Dan, in a broad comment here, the grain markets seem to be back on the upswing with the recent trading days, but there are certainly gyrations and rather sharp movements up and down day to day these days.
We're high and volatile, and as in, I guess a case of that would be in the wheat market the other day when we had a drop off that didn't seem to be well explained or easily explained by a lot of the supply demand fundamentals, but rather factors from again, rumors from overseas in terms of wheat supplies being available or not, and rolling over of positions from futures traders, no doubt made skittish by general uncertainty and broader financial markets, all seem to express themselves in terms of the wheat market suddenly falling off. So, but yet here in the that happened earlier this week. Here on Thursday, we got most of that back, a good chunk of it back anyway. March hard red winter wheat futures up 18.5 cents, back up to 803 and a quarter. So again, we're still down some 20 cents from where we were before that big drop, at least as I look at it, but still tremendous prices. And I think when we get to lofty levels like this, we're more prone to be vulnerable to rumors, to fears of people that some issue right or left could come in and affect the markets negatively.
Right. And excuse me. When we think about the wheat trade, though, and we think about domestic situations, there isn't a whole lot going on with our wheat production here in the U.S. currently, but we start to turn a bit of a wary eye to what is happening with all the dryness. Is that going to be some influence in the wheat market anytime soon, Dan?
Well, yes, eventually. As you look at the percent of U.S. wheat production in areas affected by drought, and we try to pull that together in our weekly analysis, you've got sizable percentages, especially of hard red spring wheat and durum wheat affected by in dry areas, even hard red winter wheat, not as much as those others. And again, right now, we've had these discussions with farmers and different meetings that we've had, and them wondering about whether or when dry conditions would come in and affect the wheat market. For hard red, a lot of times we'll hold pretty firm without giving up the ship on dry conditions until we get out into late February and on into March, unless we have a lot of blowing or something. That's just obvious. But we'll wait and count on the resilience of that crop to go forth. I think if drought continues on into 2022 in those areas to the north for hard red spring and durum don't have some recovery of moisture, then all that much more we'll have worries in the wheat market and strong prices. So just interesting, out of that last supply demand balance, supply demand report, WASDE report came out on December the 9th. By the time we've looked at some number crunching on that, the world stocks to use is down a little bit at 35%, but the world minus China, taking away what we estimate to be in China for stocks, is at 21.4%. And the next tightest year we had was back in 2012-13, a tremendous price year, $7.77 for wheat during that year. And we were at 22.6% stocks to use of wheat outside of China. We're at 21.4% stocks to use outside of China this year at 705, and that's with inflation. So if we would have these conditions move on again, persist into next year, then that's just pointing towards wheat markets that are very strong, both in the futures and in the cash. I would say, since we're talking about that, on our notes that we put together each week, this weekly market review, when you look at cash prices for wheat, spot prices for hard red in Kansas, Colby 773, Salina 791. These are the top end bids. 790 in Topeka, 784 Garden City, 790 Hutchinson, 754 in Columbus. And the new crop bids have, if anything, they're holding up and becoming a little bit stronger, at least as I see them. 758 Colby and Salina, about the same, a little higher in Garden, about the same in Columbus, higher yet in Topeka and Hutchinson. So, we have all this happening at the same time that our wheat exports are really held up more by the promise of what could happen in the different parts of the world than actual export shipments. So I guess that we have this ongoing conundrum of wheat prices holding up well, but yet our own exports not really being anything that would be a gangbuster situation. So I guess it adds. I guess it adds to the uncertainty and maybe the flimsiness of our support. That's probably not the best word to use, but we're held up so strong in the wheat market by this broader world situation, yet our own outflow on the demand side is just sort of okay, So I don't know that will get rains all over the globe and change that in any time quickly, but yet that's the situation that we face.
Dan, you just cited there the local prices being paid for wheat around Kansas. Just taking us right into your latest calculations on basis for the major grains total here in the state. Tell us about those trends and what they're suggesting to us.
Well, kind of staying with wheat this week for sure, since we already been talking about it. You look at Colby, strongest basis that we've had since and including 2017. The same situation out at Hugoton, Perryton Equity in that area at Prairieola. Salina, almost about equal, not stronger than, but equal to the best basis that we've seen. Hutchinson, a little more along the line of about average basis levels. Topeka had been the strongest, had come back down to be pretty much equal with average. But then in Columbus, we've seen a stronger basis than this for hard red wheat the last several years. So interesting to the west, generally the area we tend to see lower prices in that we have pretty strong wheat basis. So I guess for wheat overall, we had a run up that had happened, got highs up near, over 875 up to 888.90. Now have come back to about $8. Had that drop off that was due to a combination of factors, as we talked about earlier. And so now we sit at about again a close on yesterday about 803, and our I don't know that we would see anything that will change that dramatically from the ag supply demand side. I think that the issues of weakness that can come and affect these markets have a lot to do with the general tenor of financial markets overall and what people do in response to worries in that arena, and how that could come over and affect ag commodities overall, and wheat would be caught up in that.
And to carry through with the basis overview this week for feed grains and soybeans around Kansas, what's happening there?
Well, corn basis is as in Colby, Garden City, Salina, and I guess pretty much also in Hutchinson, pretty strong basis, is strongest in terms of seeing a number over the top of where we'd been in the past. Actually shows up in the Salina area and at the top end bids for that. But no weakness in basis except maybe in the Columbus area. Still a decent basis level, but relative to where we've been in the past, somewhat weaker than we had seen. We have seen also for grain sorghum basis. Generally, we saw a lot of strength in grain sorghum basis about the last quarter of 2020. But during this year, we're in essence the second strongest year, but not uncommon, pardon me, to see 70-80 cent stronger basis in late 2020 than we're seeing right now for sorghum. When you see the bids, if anything, we've seen grain sorghum new crop bids in a number of these areas. Well, they're holding up decently, about 487 to 527. Cash basis bids in cash prices for sorghum back now above corn in some areas. So we're anticipating, apparently when that's happening, we're anticipating export movement. And so we have the kind of the following that normal spotty pattern we see in grain sorghum movement, where we have some really good weeks, and then some weeks where we're waiting to probably gather grain sorghum together to send it out again the next week. So we've got this herky jerky thing going on, but generally it's I guess I continue to be encouraged for Kansas producers to see the strength in sorghum prices and also in corn prices. And frankly, as we've been talking about in Ag Econ in our shop, with the increase in fertilizer and a number of other costs, we'll need that. But yet the increase in fertilizer and costs that are happening for those crops will affect our bottom line for what's harvested next year. And so that's my worry, is that all the factors that are helping us to have strong prices right now, will they endure out into next fall when we have to pay the bill for these high input costs? And so that makes us probably pretty sensitive to what forward contract bids are for all these crops to see what we can lock in to protect ourselves.
And soybean basis thoughts briefly here.
Generally, new crop bids for soybeans pretty much in from 1151 or 1146 on the low side to 1191 on the high side, 1181. And basis trends for soybeans generally in Colby, Salina, Ottawa, northern part of the state, really pretty strong basis. Some of the strongest we've seen in the last several years, if not the strongest. Also pretty strong soybean basis relative to history in Garden City. Decent in Hutchinson, and okay also in Columbus. So really, I think you stand back and look at all these crops. We here in Kansas and in other parts of the country, we generally are seeing a pretty good, outstanding futures trends. It's just a matter of whether we're happy or not with the most recent trend, if it's going up or down or sideways. But basis levels generally holding up pretty well. And we have the people that are trying to buy these crops domestically and internationally are bidding up. I think there's a general worry about having adequate stocks to do what people need to do with these grains and oilseeds, and with that worry, that fear, there's not the attitude that, well, if I don't buy today, that it'll still be there tomorrow. Rather, people are trying to buy today because they're worried about tomorrow. And I think that's what's really affecting a lot of the local cash markets that we're seeing.
Well, all of that on basis trends in Kansas and everything else we've discussed today, for that matter, is fully depicted in this week's notes on the grain markets from Dan. That's found at agmanager.info. Dan, thanks, and we'll talk again next week.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.
Grain market economist Dan O'Brien of K-State Research and Extension with us on this opening part of Agriculture Today.